whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Welcome to Talking Horror with Jamie and Nikisha.
Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Nikisha, and this is Talking Horror with Jamie,
And Nikisha,
where we share our love for spooky things and talk horror through the lens of human behavior. Welcome, guys.
welcome.
Today is going to be a lot. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out there for my own sanity because we are talking about the newly released Netflix supernatural horror mini series, Midnight Mass.
Woo! Yeah! Bow, 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 bow. Actually, instead of the pew pew pews, we should have like church bells.
Oh my gosh. Or just like the acapella choir singing. It's fantastic. Actually, no, I love the bells. The bells are great.
Also,
So-
I do want to welcome everybody to season 2. Welcome to season 2 of Talking Horror.
Welcome. What a welcome.
What a welcome this show is. A little bit different format, only specifically because this is a mini series and we're going to go a little episode by episode. But same old us, you know, hashtag doing our best, season 2. So Midnight Mass was created and directed by our fave Mike Flanagan for Netflix. Specifically, the cast features some of his recurring characters of actors: Zach Gilford, Kate Siegel, Hamish Linklater, Raul Coley, and Henry Thomas, just to name a few. But there are a couple of others that we have seen in past Mike Flanagan shows. If you've seen The Haunting of Hill House or The Haunting of Bly Manor, you will see some familiar faces in Midnight Mass. So obviously, because we are going through this episode through episode, there are going to be heavy spoilers. So if you have not watched it, watch all of the episodes. We are talking about 1 through 7, not just episode 1, the entirety of the series. So please watch all of it. Get back to us. Any trigger
do your
warning?
binge.
Do your binge.
Trigger warnings. I mean, there's obviously a lot. There's heavy religious overtones. If that is upsetting to you. Nikisha's face, I wish I could describe it. She looks like ill. If that is a trigger, steer clear. There is a car accident that occurs in the beginning that they reference like visuals from. So if that is unsettling to you, also alcoholism is discussed frequently. Am I missing anything? Oh, there's some deceased cats as well as a dog that is poisoned. That is also upsetting. And a bunch of people drink poison. So if that's upsetting to you too, then this might not be for you.
Oh, and some self-harm too. People are biting themselves, cutting themselves. It's a lot of blood. It's
Some slicing and dicing, yes.
Some slicing and dicing. So because this is a lot, should we just get into it? Like just start it off?
Yeah.
Let's just go right in for sure.
At Genesis, right? That's where you start.
Oh, that's where you start. Okay. And I just have to say, because I'm making the faces, because how this show just hit home for me was absolutely insane, ridiculous. The timing of it was amazing, impeccable. I grew up in a Catholic church, and this is where the show is based off of the Catholic traditions and the sacraments. And I also just realized that there's 7 episodes and there are 7 sacraments in the Catholic church. And I was like,
oh man,
this is so crazy. But we're starting off with Genesis, which actually literally means the beginning. So we're getting the story. Jamie, do you want to kind of like let us know what is happening a little bit in episode 1?
Yeah, I mean, we're introduced to the main character Riley. We're introduced to this not town, it's an island, but basically Riley, our main character, gets in a drunk driving accident and is sentenced to serve time in jail, which Carla Gugino, I don't know if anyone recognized the voice of the judge, but also in other Mike Flanagan projects, but that was like literally the only thing that she did was the voice of the judge. But so he serves his time, and 4 years later, he's released. Which, like, separately, like, I had a hard time wrapping my head around that, but like, we're not going to get into that. We don't have enough time for that. But he is released from jail and he returns to his hometown, which is the island. It's Crockett. I want to say Crockpot, but that's what they jokingly call it.
Yes.
And he goes home to his parents and his brother, and he likes everyone who's, you know, always been in the town is still there. It's like this small fishing town. One of the first things I think I said when we were watching it was like, this really reminds me of Maine, especially because, you know, Brian and I had visited Maine, and we did take a ferry to this like really small island, and it just like very much had those vibes of like old small fishing town. There's only like a couple ferries in and out. So that's like, you know, that's the setting. And yeah, so we're learning that like this is a very religious town, you know, devout Catholics for the most part. They reference that, you know, this town is based off the fishing industry, but like they've really been messed up due to this awful oil spill that's like basically, you know, put the whole island out of commission. And yeah, so that's kind of like where we start out.
Yeah, and I'll keep it short because it's a long way to go, but I think this was a great opening episode, a lot of exposition into it, really honing in on what characters we need to be focusing on. And one of my main thoughts when I was watching this was there are a lot of different characters in this small town, and sometimes with shows of that nature that is ensemble based, it can seem like a lot, but this seemed like just enough of who we need to be focusing on so that we can carry on with the story. So I really appreciated that it was like just the right amount of people, of attention to specifics, and they carry that throughout the entirety of the show. So I think this was a great opening episode. There was a lot of good jump scares with the recurring person who, or woman who died in the car crash, and he was having like the dreams about her. And yeah, I definitely did not know where it was going to go, but I was like, okay, I'm in for the ride. I love the isolation of the island because you already feel like things are going to happen, and that's just like a perfect setting for a horror thing. And literally just the idea of religion being some form of a horror, and I'll get into this when we really get into those parts in the show, but it's just such a crazy concept, but it works so well, and we'll talk about why it works well. But those are my general thoughts for the first episode.
Yeah. Although you brought up like one of the things that I actually thought was really like surprising was with the recurring images of the woman or the young person that Riley like killed in the drunk driving accident is I thought that was a really interesting portrayal of like flashbacks and nightmares and just like the recurring nature of it, like the it just like it was so visceral, and like it was so weird because it both scared me and didn't scare me every time it happened, because like you knew that it was going to happen, which I think is also interesting in terms of like, you know, you might know your triggers of trauma, and like, you know what things are going to set off flashbacks, or know that you're going to have recurring nightmares of trauma, but it still is like unsettling. It doesn't matter how many times that you've experienced it. So like you as the viewer seeing it, like seeing the camera shift as he's like lying down in bed, so you're kind of like going face to face with him and it's like twisting, but then you're also like seeing the image of you know, the dead woman, and then seeing his face and seeing the image of the dead woman, like going back and forth, using the music as well to like also kind of set you off. I'm like, why does this keep, I said that loud, I was like, why does this keep scaring me? Like, I know it's gonna happen, I don't understand, but like I think that's like, I thought that was an excellent portrayal of like trauma and yeah, flashbacks and nightmares. So I just
I don't even get me started on the soundtrack, because fantastic, just incredible. But Brian, do you have thoughts on the first episode?
I thought it was great. I agree with both of you. I think it set everything up really well. Also, it doesn't get too deep into everything. Like, it sets up Riley. It just it's such good exposition with spectacular ambiance. And we know we have 6 more episodes to go after this. We have a very high we're highly anticipating this Mike Flanagan journey. Also, like, I had no idea what this was actually about. I understood that this plot wise, I get that we were about to, knowing Mike Flanagan and like how he likes to talk through things and do things, and not knowing him personally, me and Mike, but like
Yes.
knowing his work, because like during the pandemic, Jamie and I watched every single film in his in
Mm.
his
Filmography.
filmography, yeah. And so like really excited to see this. And so I knew from a high level, one, that it was super personal to him, and two, that it was going to deconstruct religion through the horror lens, and or at least specifically in more general religion in terms of like community and for the individual, but also for the Catholicism in general. But so I really thought this set up everything well, like Jamie was talking about with exposition. A couple things I do want to point out about this episode is one, the I think it's this episode where Zach Gilford, Riley says that while he was in jail, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this was episode 2, he talks about how he read everything from the Bible to the Quran to the Torah, and like nothing clicked for him. And I thought, what an interesting way to set up this atheist that's not making the decision based on ignorance, but is making on the decision based on education and a wealth of knowledge. I thought setting him up that way, making him someone who was very smart, but like traumatized because of what he did, and the shame he felt and the guilt he felt. And we'll get into one of the best scenes that Flanagan's ever written in a couple episodes. So I really appreciated those two things. The third thing I'll say is that I really appreciated the flat out racism in terms of the storytelling mechanism and them not holding back. He called that first scene when they're watching him get off the boat, and he says, "Oh, Aladdin's coming." It really hit, because like nobody like, because you don't know what this is about, and like, oh wow, this is going to be something. And then they talk about like his dad's the sheriff, and they call the sheriff Sharif, and I'm just like, oh, like I was actually surprised at how much the racism. I feel like we watch so much stuff where the racism is like underneath everything, but like to have it like actually be spoken was, and I mean this in the most positive way possible, refreshing from a storytelling point of view, because you knew it was going to come back in some sort of a way without just like being under the surface. And then the last thing I'll say, and Jamie and I talked about this while we were watching it, is some of the old age makeup was very distracting.
Very.
But Jamie and I were saying like, this just means we're going to get some badass flashback sequences. At least that's what we thought at the time. So we were like, awesome. We love all these actors and actresses who are great up. And like, we look very forward to like seeing them. Like, so we thought like, what's the secret? What's the secret of this island that they're talking about? Like, oh, we also talked about how it seems like anyone who leaves comes back, because Kate Siegel's character came back, or Aaron came back after having bad luck out there. Riley came back. They talk about how those people just left and like were never really heard from. And so like there's this concept. So we were thinking like, what's making people stay on this island? And then you have the whole other thing with the new priest getting there, with like this, what's in the trunk, like how are all these things connected? Because all the stories felt very decentralized from each other. The only thing that was bringing them together was the island. So that's kind of where we landed on that. And then all this stuff bringing together like the cat, like them on that little mini island off of it, with talking about the cats. And that's when we see the that Flanagan scare where it's there the whole time and then it moves. And then and then them talking about how like all the dead bodies like would he makes the joke that all the bones come up on their side of the island when there's a storm. And then and I was actually surprised at like a lot of this show, I know I'm rambling, but a lot of this show, I thought that like they talk about the storm. I thought the storm would be in episode 2, but like it's in episode 1. Like there's a lot of things that you feel like they're building up for like these bigger moments, these like more drawn out moments, but they just like he just like gets right to it to set everything up. And so like you take the cats and the bones and then like you put those stories together and that's what you get at the end. Okay, I'll stop there. I really what I'm saying is I really liked episode 1. I think it was awesome setup.
No, absolutely. Also, did we notice that in Riley's room, the 7 movie poster in the background?
Yeah, yeah.
Love those little details. I also, in one of my notes, it might have been in episode 2 or 3, but I definitely put those prosthetics are not fooling me. This lady is about to have a transformation of some kind because this woman is young. Okay. But I didn't think about flashbacks. I was like, no, something's going to happen with her in the now because she,
Interesting.
It has to be, but maybe we'll release those episodes later, but we actually thought scene by episode. So the next episode is Psalms, which means songs, and there's a lot of singing happening. I definitely was singing to some of the hymns that were familiar to me in this, which was equally creepy because you know that something's just not right with everyone. I also just want to comment on the writing, and this might not make sense to anyone else, but it made sense to me in the moment. But a lot of the writing feels theatrical and presentational, and not that it's a bad thing, but every time you hear a monologue, it's not really in common dialogue or something that's naturally flowing dialogue. It's very like, this is what I have to say, and I am telling this because this is like pertinent information for everyone. But that's what I loved about this. Like every time I watched an episode, it felt like these monologues could have came straight from a play on stage. Like this whole show could be some form of a play on stage, like very reminiscent of the play Doubt. And so I just really enjoyed that writing style because you don't really see that a lot, and you don't see it pulled off well in the TV film setting. So it was just beautifully written. But
I think that's like a Flanaganism. Like that's, I think that's like something that I've noticed in some of his other miniseries is that like, I think that's something that he does. And like, that's part of how he moves the story forward. But like, I think that his writing is really powerful and he writes really well. But I agree that there is something like, like there were moments where I was like, okay, like let's keep it going. But I think theatrical is a great description for like what comes up in those moments.
Yeah, for sure. And so this is go ahead.
So I also just want to add with what you said, Nikisha, I think also key to that, especially for something like Doubt or this, when you're casting the religious figure, what it's the priest, the pastor, whatever, Hamish Linklater is so engaging in these pulpit scenes, in the church scenes, that
fantastic.
And like and that also, that energy and that engagement in there, you need to believe that these people are not only devout but also like there's a reason for them to come back. Like he's such an energetic, it was just like that casting and his ability to do that, similarly to like Philip Seymour Hoffman in Doubt, in terms of like his when you're engaged in those, like as someone preaching to the literal like
preaching to the choir,
congregation.
The congregation.
I was gonna say that, but the congregation, like, yeah,
yes.
I just wanted to point that out too.
Yeah, and just with that, so this is the episode where we have the dog Pike that was poisoned after they had, they had the church gathering after the service, and so we're getting pieces together of more of like who these people are. And that's when you really pay attention to Beverly Keane, who is like the priest's right-hand man, and I put in here, I think she killed the dog with the rat killer. And then it's confirmed in the thing. But I definitely wrote, this priest is acting, and it's every single homily that is in every single episode. It's just, like you said, so gripping and so engaging that you understand why these people are following him. It's not like, oh, something must be wrong with him, this is too to the right, or whatever the case, too extremist. No, he's so compelling, but also there's like a vulnerability. There's a genuine aspect to his nature. He still seems inviting, and you can just kind of go along with why some people were like, yeah, I'll follow you to the literal ends of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to bring up, because this might be a little bit longer of a conversation, but there's the AA meetings that are happening in this episode. And so I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to ask, because this was the first time that I heard about rational recovery and the addiction voice recognition technique. Can you talk up? Do you know about those? Can you talk about those? Okay.
No, this is me shaking my
Okay.
head for those because it's a podcast. No, I had never heard of those before. I mean, it definitely was interesting. Um, just kind of like talking through, like I have experience working like within substance use work, but not really like AA specifically, or or like any of these other types of strategies to address alcoholism. But it was definitely really interesting that it wasn't just the like kind of go-to AA type
Right.
of like approach, that they took something like a little bit different, which I think also is like in line with what the themes are in the show too. But yeah, I don't know anything about it.
Well, I mean, just like in the context of it and looking up, it's like, is this a real thing? Are they just making this up? But it is. And it just reminds me in my, cognitive behavioral therapy that I take every week. It reminds me of
Yay.
like the inner critic in your mind, because basically the addiction voice recognition technique was, he basically was saying it's identifying the person that's saying they want the alcohol. It's not you, it's somebody else. And once you separate that person from you, you can then control that voice in a sense. And so it just reminded me of like, your inner critic that takes you down the slope, takes you down the spiral, and trying to take a hold of that so that you can control those thoughts. And, whether you're, following through with how you're feeling, or you're telling it that it's false information, all those things. But in just talking about that, that reminded me of my own therapeutic thing that I've experienced. So yeah. But any other thoughts? There was a lot more continuation of exposition in this, but any other things in the
Sure.
episode that stood out to you guys?
I think this was the point where Brian and I kind of both looked at each other and decided that we kind of speculated what ended up being true, but this is where we guessed that Father Paul was actually the Monsignor. And like part of kind of speaking to him being so engaging, as you were saying before, made me think of this, is like he already knew everyone's name, he knew everything about everyone. Like, of course he could have gotten that information from the Monsignor, but given that the Monsignor was also like very far along in his dementia, that would have been pretty impossible. So I was like, there's no way that he like is able to speak to everybody and know so much about them in this way, unless like it's actually this guy. Which then I think we were like, it makes sense with all the makeup, that the old makeup that people are wearing, and like maybe it'll be a combo of the flashbacks. But yeah, so we guessed it early because we're smart.
Yes.
Yeah, but also a lot of the pictures of the Monsignor Pruitt, a lot of the oil painting of him in the house, like they all just looked like young people with old makeup on. So that also like helped us to do that. But yeah, we definitely guessed it in this one, especially because and then the doctor says like at the picnic, like he just keeps like, so what was super smart about the show is that because she's a lesbian and has her partner on the or a woman that she's dating on the island with her, you think that the Monsignor staring at her is because of the sin that he thinks she's doing. So you're not, so we'll get into that later on. So you don't ever think that it's the same person. However, we definitely like felt something different there. So that was that definitely struck us, but also brilliant kind of writing, red herring type stuff there.
And there's so much of that within it, and we'll get into like the parts of that, but it's just so beautifully crafted that you get those pieces and then you're like, oh, okay, that's drawing my memory back to whatever, all the foreshadowing. Also, this is the first episode where we see the big miracle. There are little things that are happening, like Riley's parents, like his mom can now see better. She doesn't need her glasses. His dad's back is not hurting anymore. But the big miracle is Lisa, and she was paralyzed, but now she is walking. Did you guys have any idea like where that came from, or any clues as to like what was going on as far as like how the miracles were happening? Or is it still just like, this is insane?
Well, at that point, there had been a comment earlier. We guessed that something was happening through the communion, or not communion. The what's
No, that's the communion.
The body and blood.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So because there had been multiple comments how like, oh, Father, we're out of this, like, oh, I'll get it, like the wine, or like previously. So and also we were also thinking about, okay, like there's a reason why Riley isn't, why his dad told him not to take it. So like we were trying to like, obviously he was telling him, for one, he's an alcoholic, so he didn't want him to take it. Two, he was telling him not to because he didn't it was kind of also because like he didn't deserve it, he didn't earn it or whatnot. So like there was him not taking it, plus there were a lot of things in there, obviously. But it was still a wildly effective scene, especially in the next episode when Riley is yelling at him like, I understand that, but you weren't going to embarrass this girl, like how did you know? That was a really effective sequence, especially what made that moment better was not the tension of him like torturing this little girl in front of everyone, but everyone's reactions from like horror, who is this man, to like true amazement in their eyes, was just like a spectacular work of art.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, going into the second episode, the third episode, it's Proverbs, and that literally just means wisdom and knowledge. So now everybody we're gaining as an audience more understanding and wisdom of what's happening in time with the people in the congregation. We're getting more information about exactly what's going on, if we haven't guessed it yet, with everything.
Because we're so smart.
On. Y'all are smart. I was like, I don't know what is happening, but this is all fantastic. And I'm just singing along to hymns.
You're like, I'm having a blast.
Near my God to thee. That's my jam.
Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I know in the second episode we get insight into like how Lisa was paralyzed by Joe, and the beginning is when there's like the really intense confrontation, which like I was like on the edge of my seat, and it was so intense, and like you could see, I mean, it was so powerful, her like holding him accountable for what he did by telling her story, and like her sharing her narrative and her perspective was so empowering. And then like literally processing what that experience did to her and how much she hated him for it, but then also moving towards forgiveness. Like, I mean, it was so intense and emotional, especially because like obviously Joe was racked with guilt for this accident that he caused, and is this like self-loathing, also alcoholic, who is just like that is just his state of being. He's just like hates himself, like that is very clear. And like her going through this whole thing, and him like sobbing in front of her, and then she forgives him, and then she leaves, and he's like sobbing again. Like you see the impact that has on him, and like him actually thinking like, okay, maybe I'm like at this point where I need to like start to try to forgive myself for what I've done. And like it just like so, oh my God, that scene was my poor little empath heart was like so overwhelmed.
Very much so. But that's like one of the central themes of just like forgiveness throughout the whole thing, whether it's
guilt
and making amends or reconciling with yourself or with others, however will give you peace. And the extremes of coping mechanisms that people are using to try to find that peace is like one of the main themes that was so enjoyable. But definitely some of the thoughts that I had in this episode, I mean, we're finding out, Father Paul who is still Father Paul at this moment, like has a moment where he dies, quote unquote, we think, but then he comes back to life. And, we see his story with the angel and the sand dunes and all that stuff. So now, and I think this is the one where he's in the confession, like asking God to forgive him for lying about everything, but knowing that it's for a greater purpose because he will eventually reveal the truth to everyone of what's happening. But right now he has to keep everything under wraps, as part of God's plan. So yeah, it's some key moments in that, because I definitely did not think he was a younger Amon Senior. But I was curious and I want to know what you guys think of how soon Bev found out about everything, because we don't really see when she finds out. We just see that when shit is happening, that she's part of the process now. Like the moments where she comes in and we think, oh, she's going to be finding this out with us, or she's going to find this out now. It's like, no, she already knew. And there was one very tiny moment where Bev was inside of the Monsignor's house and she like looks over to the side, but you never know what she's looking at. So I guess I'm assuming that it was the younger picture that's up of him. Yeah.
That's when it happens. 100%.
Okay. Right. Yes. Because it's not like fully fleshed out. It's just like and I was like, what does she see? And I was like, oh, she saw the younger picture of him. And now she's like, all right, I'm on board. Let's do this. Let's all get rejuvenated. Yeah.
This episode also has the school scene where they're talking about the Bibles and
handing out the Bibles in public school.
That scene made me so angry for multiple reasons. I mean, good angry, meaning like I was very engaged in it. Like what made me the most angry about that scene, and we're already setting up her character, because they also talk, Bev specifically, they also talk about how like she took all that money. She convinced people to take the settlement, so they just put it back into the church. And Bev is obviously supposed to be a certain specific side of religion, all religions, but specific to this one. And we'll talk more about that at the end when she has a certain confrontation. But like her inability to listen, because she already believes that she's always right, was so frustrating. And I found it fascinating to watch the other people in the room either agree with her or not agree with her. And that like Aaron just had no power in that situation. Whereas I thought that the sheriff was making spectacular points, and not only good points, but it's less about the points because we already agreed with his points, but the way that he presented them and then like flipped it on her. Like, well, if someone was giving out, this there, that like, it was just infuriating. And I know that was just to set up certain other things. But like deeply infuriating that sequence was, for sure.
Yeah. But just great on the religious commentary all around is great, but like just having these conversations where, and one of my friends who was watching this too, it was like, they're also not preaching one way or the other to you.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. They're just like giving you all sides of it, but it's setting up for a grand thing that's outside of religion itself. Like this show isn't about religion, but it's just nice to hear how they're handling it with such delicacy, and they're not trying to persuade you one way or the other. So it was really nice.
Yeah. Something we didn't talk about, which I think is the best thing in this, is the first AA meeting between Riley and Father Paul. Or because there's that conversation they have in that moment where they're talking about like alcohol is neither good nor bad. It's what the outside person takes from it and does to it. And I think that applies to this entire series. And that, to me, that's the actual thesis statement of this. And like, religion is neither good nor bad. It's about what the individual takes. It's about the baggage being brought to it. The same thing with the community bringing to that. And even the angel, this whole time we have been told it's an angel. But this creature is neither good nor bad. We're defining it as an angel. Some people could define this creature as the devil, some as a demon. Some people could define this creature as just a vampire. Like, it's all about the context and who's bringing that narrative to the situation. And I thought that like, just to me, that theme just kept popping up in every single episode, and we'll get to it, especially at the end. There's a lot of moments that really filter into that kind of point of view.
Absolutely. Whatever is true to you, whatever you believe, is your truth, is what's right for you. Great. Any other thoughts on the Proverbs episode?
Mm-mm.
And then shit hits the fan, literally in episode 4, Lamentations, which is just all of the yelling and screaming and things. So I saw the title and I just put, oh shit, in my notes, because I knew it was going to be like the turning point of everything. I mean, things have already been happening, and now here we are. Erin loses her baby. She thinks it's a miscarriage, but it's having to do with everything, with the communion that's being taken and people who are being quote unquote healed. We have Sarah, who's the doctor, and she's trying to get blood samples and for Erin, and we're finding out about things, the blood, bursting into flames in the sun. So it was just a lot of things happening. I'm trying to look through my notes and see what else was.
So also in this episode, they have the conversation about what they believe death is. This is where Father Paul starts to burn in the sunlight. This is the first time that Mildred recognizes him as Pruitt. Also, this is when I was like, wait, is that Alex Esso from Starry Eyes? And like, it took me a second to like realize, like, she's in the makeup. I was like, oh shit, that's Starry Eyes.
Gosh, that is. I was like, where do I know her from? But I didn't look up anything because I didn't want to accidentally see like a review or the Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it was only until I think it was like in that moment when you said it out loud, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna just look at the actors and no other information.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Oh, and this is also when Riley
Joe is killed.
Okay. Yes,
this is when Joe is killed, and then he figures out a lie that the priest has been telling him. So he goes back to the rec center, and then that was. So let's talk about the end for a second. Sorry, this is episode 4 of 7. I was shocked that they would do this to Riley. I mean, I didn't know it was going to happen, but like that was shocking. Also, is this the episode with the jump scare that made me like poop myself when he turns the light on in the little boy's room and the face is right there?
Oh yes, the sheriff with his son.
Oh, I don't know if it was this episode or not, but that scared. Yeah,
I had to pause it too. I wanted to pause and see like if I could see the actual figure to see if that would give me a clue of like what was happening, like what was going on.
Sure.
Because Flanagan be hiding ghosts in everywhere and all the places. So I was like, is this going to lead me to something else? But I literally put in my notes, I don't think that Riley's dead. He can't be. There's like more to do. Because where does the narrative go if he's not there? Where does the story shift to? But things happen.
They found a way.
They found a way. So just a lot of death in this particular episode, like the death of the baby, the death of Joe, the death of Riley, quote unquote. But also more revelations of things, like you said, Sarah's mom recognizing Pruitt for the first time. And this was when I finally realized that it was the communion that was like helping all these people. I was like, what is this magic that's floating through everything? I was just so engrossed in the story. Actually, all in the homilies, I was just like, this is so fantastic. This acting is spectacular. I don't even really understand what's happening, but this acting is fantastic.
There are no weak links in this.
No.
I think this like also was like, oh, sorry.
I'm just going to quickly say, I feel like in horror movies, there's always a weak link because like of budget or whatever it is. And like, there's always like the director's friend who's just like in it for fun. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's always like an acting weak link. Like This has never been the case with any of Mike Flanagan's things, even like his earlier stuff. All right. Sorry, Jamie.
Oh no, I was just gonna say like when when the mayor and the handyman discover Joe's body, and then Bev basically like orchestrates hiding Joe's body, like that. I mean, it's the first of many scenes of Bev's where like she's so good, but like I'm like seething with rage watching her, but she's so good at like at just being a fundamentalist and like picking and choosing whatever things work for her narrative to justify literally anything that she wants to do. But like she's so good at it, and it's also wild to think about like how effectively people can like conjure up like, you know, passages from the Bible and like and be able to like, that's wild. But like you really believe it, and like and you see her believing it, like that's how effective she is like she like just fully believes what she's saying in those moments, and then is able to convince everyone around her of this and say like, you can't, it's okay that you don't feel guilty because this makes sense because XYZ, and then like spews like 5 different quotes from the Bible to make it make sense in that moment, like taken out of context. Of course you could say whatever you want. It's like it's wild how easily she's able to do that, and like the just the kind of person that she is. I hate her, like seething hatred for her, but like I think that just speaks to how good she is.
Absolutely, because I mean, she has an answer for everything. So of course she feels like she's right. Literally anything that people can say, she'll just draw the verses. And I was going to also comment on the fact that she has an expansive knowledge of the Bible. Like you literally memorize the thing from top to bottom, because like also, and I think I put, and maybe not in this episode, one of the episodes, like hearing familiar verses, but like you said, Jamie, out of context to feed her narrative was just so genius. But that is something that is done all of the time. Like I know people like Bev. I grew up with people like Bev who will take whatever Bible verse to fit whatever they want to make it seem like they're right about a specific issue. And it's just amazing that it's never something that could be the verse can't, you know, condemn themselves. It's always condemning other people. And yeah, she's just always going to be right because she always has an answer for something. So of course, nothing that she says is wrong because everything is backed up by the Bible, because the Bible is what it is, which makes the other conversation back at the school in the other episodes so great, because he's talking about the fact that we believe the same things, but the fact is that this has been translated over and over and changed over and over again by random men. So we honestly don't know what the true context of everything is. So you can't tell me that we're worshiping different people. Like we are worshiping the same ones. We just have different viewpoints about, you know, things that you're taking into a different set of context and making it seem like it's something else when it's not. So,
and that's also like, no, I was going to say the same exact thing, that bring up the same exact conversation, because I think the other thing that's really effective about Midnight Mass is that it's not just criticizing, it's not just criticizing Catholicism, it's not just criticizing religion, it's really criticizing like extremists and fundamentalists and taking things to that like very like intense level that is causing harm, because you can say it about anything, and that there's still like there are still the characters who like who have faith, who are religious, but are not doing it to that degree. And like and I have more to say about that in later episodes too. And that was something I was concerned about, because I was like, you know, is he going to try to just say that like Catholicism is bad? Because like, you know, been there, done that. Like we've seen that story before. And like, that's not interesting to me. But like, I like this because like it is complex, and it is so much about the individual perspective and like the individual connection that you have to religion, to your religion, to the meanings that you take away from this. It's so much about that meaning that we make, and how one person can, I mean, the AA conversations, I don't remember if it's in this one or not, but like the conversations about like good versus bad, and like that the meanings that you can take from different things, and how you can, you know, justify it for something good, or, you know, excuse something that is bad. And it's
Right.
just, I think that is what I loved about this whole series, is that it's not just fully attacking religion or fully attacking Catholicism. Not that I'm Catholic, but like just generally that it's like focusing on like what happens when you take this to like the far lengths of extremism, and like where can it like cause so much more harm.
Absolutely. And, or just taking things literally,
Mm-hmm.
when a lot of the times people were speaking, I mean, you know, like Jesus speaking in parables, you know, people are speaking figurative language, and people aren't taking that into consideration. They're taking literal text translation of a translation of a translation of a translation, and thinking that it's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful things. Brian, do you have things to add?
Uh, no, this was a great episode. I mean, I mean, this is when I really felt like whatever was plot was happening is going to happen. Um, also, like, it was really, yeah. I think it's the next. Yeah, let's go to the next one because I have a little more to say about the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The only thing I'm going to say is episode 5 is gospel. Good news. Riley's not dead. Take it
Woo!
away.
Woo! Yeah, not
Alive.
dead.
Not dead.
I mean, something that was that like I, you know, to be honest, forgot about, which I think Brian and I were talking about this too, is like this episode I think started with Bill slash Bull's mom filing the missing persons, or like encouraging the sheriff to actually follow up on Bill, and basically saying like, you know, these devout Catholics are like saying that they're all these good people, but like really, you know, there's a lot more going on, and kind of reinforcing that like, you know, the sheriff, even though he is this outsider and like is still definitely being treated like one, there are still elements where he has kind of been taken in by the community. Also something that I didn't mention, but like in the second episode early on, the mayor makes a comment about like, you know, people needing to stick together on this island. People like, you know, they're this unit, they're this like community that has to stay together. They don't, you know, want outsiders. They don't want people to leave. They just want people to like stay there. And so I think it's interesting that like, even though the sheriff still feels like an outsider in a lot of ways, you know, he's calling Bill Bull, like that's like just like a small, you know, reflection of how he has been taken in that by that community, and kind of like already having his perception colored by this perspective of this like community on the island.
Yeah.
Oh, also, I want to call out from the second episode how spectacular that one shot of them walking on the beach, cleaning up the cats was.
Oh,
Like there were
yes.
no edits at all. That was awesome.
Done. Beautifully written. Brian, do you want to go into your spiel about this episode?
Okay, so this episode is, I think, one of my favorite episodes. I think this episode is spectacular. It is deeply sad. The moment in this is Act of the Apostles, right? Or is this gospel? Oh, this is gospel.
No, this is gospel.
This is the fifth one. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that this episode is so deeply sad for many, and really, this is the episode that really satisfied me the most, I think. I think that when that the whole conversation that they're having in the when he's recovering from everything, when Father Pruitt tells him the story of like replacing the mouse, and then they get into that whole thing where he's like, stop bullshitting me. Like you see the side of Father Pruitt that you've seen in mass come out in that like meeting between the two of them, and just like, you know, that stop bullshitting me, like what are you actually feeling? And he's like, I'm jealous that you killed this person and don't feel guilt, where I just am racked with this guilt for something that I don't even remember doing. I was asleep at the wheel, like I didn't even hit the brakes. Like that whole conversation. Zach Gilford is so good in this, and if you've never watched Friday Night Lights, you should. He's spectacular in that as well. But like, he's just, that whole sequence is great, and like when he lets him go, it's like he understands what's happening. He like gains a little bit of his faith back. This like restores a little bit. He doesn't necessarily believe in Catholicism, but it restores his faith, which is the important thing. And then the end of this, when he is talking with Aaron and they bring him out on the boat and you just don't know what's going to happen, and then you realize this is his dream. You realize that like they're in the boat, and then he says that line where he's like, we're in the boat so that I can't run away. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, this is a wild story. Like, let's say I did believe you, like whatever. And then the moment where he's that moment when you realize what he's going to do, where he is going to wait out there until the sun, he needs her to see what's happening. And this is him repenting for what he did, because by him giving his life and proving what is happening on this island, he gives his mom a chance, his dad a chance, everybody else a chance to survive what is happening, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And that's his, by saving all of these people, that's his way of repenting and just giving himself for, that's his purpose. He found his purpose again. And then like, and that beautiful moment where the sun rises and he sees the girl he killed, but then it immediately cuts to her screaming. And then we actually watched most of the credits with her just like screaming over the credits. Was just like, what a spectacular arc for a character. Like, he's our main character and we've got 2 episodes left. Like, it was so good. Like, like, and the notes he writes, like when he, like that whole, like, I think he brings him a note in the 6th one.
It's the next episode.
Okay, but like, there's just something, and is this also the episode? Oh, the episode previous to this is where his dad apologizes to him. So like a lot of things have happened already in this that I just like, I don't know. This one really hit home, especially after their death conversation, which we didn't talk about. So he talks about death as just being like, your body shuts down, your neurons shut down. Like, this is science. It's just over. So a person who believes that it's just science and whatever, in my opinion, legacy is a big thing that comes into, like, what do you leave behind because you are no longer here and you can't move forward, you stop. So what is your legacy? And his legacy is the death of this woman. Like, that's his legacy. So he talks about that. And then when she talks about it from the perspective of her dead, of her miscarried child. So she's like, this is what I hope happens to my child. She doesn't say what she believes. And you imagine some of that is intertwined with her, or at least her beliefs of what that is changes based on the fact that, like, this was her purpose. He said he didn't have one, and she just lost her purpose. Like, the reason she came back was to raise this kid and all of that. And just those conversations feeding into him kind of like being able to like reframe his narrative of death and like choose how he goes out was just like deeply sad and incredibly beautiful. And also during this episode, Jamie and I were like, oh no, like, now she knows that not only did the father kill, like, have her miscarry because her body like was doing this, like, we guess this, but also like what also proved that is the fact that when she went off island to have the doctor's appointment and it told her that like she never was pregnant, like, man, it's like a very we'll talk about another movie at another point in time, but like
no, we'll just talk about like,
I mean, I could talk about this episode forever. This episode like really did it for me.
Absolutely. Like, hitting home to the empaths, like Jamie said, like, this was the one that hit home for me because of how beautifully crafted it was, on top of just because it's also the fact that it's the same music happening in the background of this calm serenity and him accepting his fate and redefining his purpose of saying, like, even though my legacy might be I did this, I know, and I've reconciled within myself that in doing this and killing myself, I'm helping, my family hopefully survive whatever is going to happen. And so he's at peace with himself. And so you have all this calming music, and then the juxtaposition of transitioning into Aaron screaming on top of that. It's just so heartbreaking, so gut-wrenching. also just the cinematography of that moment was beautifully crafted, because we know what's going to happen, and the fact that we don't get that immediate gratification of him burning up in the flames. It's like, no, you get the sweet side of it. You're going to see what he sees. You're going to see, like Brian was saying, the narrative has changed. And now, because Aaron was talking about, she hopes that when she dies, you know, the memories of everything that you've done and the good moments of your life are going to be coming up. And so now, even though we might not have a good moment, he has this like peace and reconciliation of, now he's in a better place with this girl. And then Jamie is there left to, you know, process what is happening and also try to like change her narrative. And a lot of this
Aaron?
Yeah, Aaron. Yes.
Oh, you said me, and I was like, oh no.
You're just in it to win it. Sorry, Jane. But Aaron is like, her purpose, like, and purpose is also a big part of this, because what people are asking their purpose, and then what it actually ends up being, because they chose it to be, whether they chose it to be, or because of the circumstances led them to make the decisions, you know, or push them in a certain direction. But it's just nice to see that kind of character arc with everyone, and to have that character arc in just 7 episodes with all of these different people. And like Brian said, it was just very satisfying to have that ending, even though it was gut-wrenching.
Yeah, this was also the episode where the father or where the Monsignor gave that like really aggressive sermon, and like I guess like his sermons
welcome to my
were
army.
kind of, he's talking about like being soldiers in God's army, and like I guess signaling this like escalation in
Yes.
you know what he's preaching. And that's also where Mildred is like visibly upset and like leaves and is like, never come back here ever again.
Right. Yeah, this was the first midnight mass. Yeah.
And
it's the title.
First midnight mass. Yes.
I want to come back to this when we get to the end, but I just wanted to make a note that like that happened.
Okay.
About Mildred. Okay. Great.
About Mildred and about like his very aggressive homily.
Awesome. So now we're into episode 6, and the army is being formed on both sides. Acts of the Apostles. I also had to look up, because I'm a bad Christian. I was like, what's the difference between a disciple and apostles? Because like they're interchanged a lot just in general.
I mean, we Googled the difference between Catholicism and Christianity, so you're fine.
There you go. But yes, if you didn't know, so a disciple is a student, but an apostle is the one that actually goes out and spreads the news. So Acts of the Apostles, not only are you having the army of Monsignor trying to spread the news of what's happening there, but now you have Aaron, the juxtaposition of that, and she's forming her army trying to spread the news of what's going on with, or what just happened with Riley and what he told her. And I want to say it might be this episode or it might be the next episode, but it was very heartbreaking when Aaron was trying to tell Riley's mom that maybe that was the last episode.
No, this episode.
No, it was this one.
Was this one? Okay. Yeah. And
because this is when they try to go off the island, and it's this one. It's
yes,
this one.
Yes. And yeah, so now you can see the sides like clearly forming of who's going where, and the army that's happening. But yes, let's talk about all of that. What are your
Dumbledore's army?
Dumbledore's army. Yes. Oh, and I do want to say, like, sorry, quick thing, because I also thought it was beautiful that the foreshadowing of Riley's death being back to dust, and then the Ash Wednesday service that they had. So when
my God, the note.
Yes. And it was before he got the note. So I was really happy. I was like, oh my God, the foreshadowing of back to dust. And then the note said, you know, from dust we came and dust we go, whatever the quote is. And I was like, this is so fucking good. This is so good.
Let's see. I mean, I really like that in Aaron, like, you know, coming together with others, there isn't like that ongoing resistance. Like the way that they come together, I think, is really interesting and kind of talking. I like how the doctor, how Sarah is like, that would be fucking bonkers, wouldn't it? As she's like showing all of their blood samples like burning and setting off the fire alarms. Like there could be this like, no one's gonna believe you, but there's just like enough, even though it's crazy, there's just enough to be like, oh no, I think I believe what you're saying. Like we have no other reason to not believe it. And like it's also crazy just because it's like, they're on this isolated island. Like in theory, they can believe whatever they want to believe, which is kind of what's happening anyway.
Right.
So who's to say that this isn't actually happening?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also like, usually it's you think that the religious people are cuckoo, and there's a scientific explanation for it. And in this one, like they're struggling to come up with a scientific reason for it. And I appreciated that to kind of show the other side, because us as the audience member knows this is like vampire bat angel hanging out around.
Literally.
Whereas like she's like, well, I've read about things with like blood viruses where like I really appreciated them thinking on that side of the coin, if that makes sense.
Also, on the same vein, even though there are extremes, there are people that are living in the gray area of it. So I would say like the mayor and his wife are living in kind of the gray area of it, more so on the side of the priest. But because they had the miracle with their daughter, they're like, okay, this is real and we want to sincerely help people. So they're going to follow him to the ends. But there also still isn't a sense of like, they're not on Bev's level, of crazy, of, extremists, not crazy, extremists. So it's nice to see that there's different levels all across the board of how people are reacting, how people are responding. And I also just love that even though all this is happening, it's still not shaking some people's beliefs or what they believe are true, especially with Lisa. And I think this is in the last episode, but just the fact that she's still like praying that her parents are okay, even though she's seen all of the crazy, all of the insane things that you cannot explain. And she's a product of this stuff that is happening. She's still holding on to the core belief of it all and not the extreme nature of it all, which was very beautiful to see.
Yes, that was like what I was saying earlier, where I was glad that again it's not just like a full on 100% rejection of their religious beliefs, but that like there are like, again, it doesn't have to be extreme. There are still the elements that like are there that hold value, and like that you can continue to have faith, and it doesn't have to be like all bad.
Right.
And also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Go.
I mean, some other things that happened in this episode that really, when everyone is they cut all the power. Also, there's that. So let's take a step back. There's that. So Sarah, Aaron, and Mildred are all working together, and then there's that powerful scene when Sarah goes to the sheriff and he talks about his experiences in the police force after 9/11. That like gives us a little bit more information about that, and then this is also on the heels of his son wanting to and going to
The
mass
church.
and just seeing more the church and seeing what it's more about. So he's spectacular in this show, as he was also in Bly Manor. But I just thought
And
it was
iZombie.
and iZombie. Just really, really, really well executed and really good. And that just added a lot of color to like what we're seeing. And then also, the Chekhov's gun situation where she's like, and you sure you don't carry a gun, like that whole thing. So that was happening. Then you have everybody going to the church because the power has been cut, the boats have been messed with, and the cell tower was taken offline. So they're really isolated at this point, and all they have is each other. And I refer back to the religion is not good or bad, it's what you do with it. And I think that sequence, that gorgeous sequence of all of them singing by candlelight, marching to the church is gorgeous, like with all these candles. it's all context, because that scene to us is terrifying and the ambiance is scary because it feels like this cult. It feels like, but on the flip side, like if you change the music or you change the circumstance and use the same footage, it's just this gorgeous community coming together to celebrate the thing they all believe in together. Like it was both beautiful and unsettling all at the same time, and I really appreciated that. And then I really liked the reveal of everything at the end of the episode. People were just like, you heard some gasps when he said he was Father Pruitt, but people were still like thinking it through, like what the hell? And then he took took the rat poison, and then like came back, and that's when people started like totally freak out. And Jamie and I were talking about like, is the final midnight mass, the one that we assume is coming, similar to the storm, going to be the last episode, or is it the end of this episode? And of course it was the end of this episode. But man, that whole sequence was just so beautifully shot. It was very clear about what was happening and why people were doing certain things, which I feel like a lot of movies and horror movies get convoluted at the end of it, but also make people do things outside of the reason they're doing them just to get the plot. But I feel like nobody did anything at the end of, we're talking about episode 6 right now, that felt out of character for everybody else. Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, because this is the moment where everybody is deciding if they want to take the poison or not, and then they're waking up and attacking the people who did not, take the poison and all the things. And my only question was just because in that moment we see the sheriff like shoot Monsignor, and we see Bev trying to figure out what do we need to do next, and the Sturge is like, okay, what do we do? She's like, open the doors. And he was like, wait, we're not supposed to. The Monsignor is like down on the ground and can't talk. And I was just trying to see at what moment, like what was the thing that made the Monsignor change his mind and realize we went off course. And I guess you see it more in the next episode, but in that moment for the rest of it, I was kind of like, this seems like too much of a changeover of like, oh, now shit has really hit the fan. It's like, shit has already hit the fan. Like you've already went to, the complete, you can't go any more further right than you have gone. Like there's just a wall there. Like you can't move. And so just a tiny bit of, I was like, I don't understand how he quickly changed into, okay, now this is bad. I mean, there are other things like in the last episode with like his relationship with Mildred and, Sarah and all of that kind of come into play. And you're like, okay, yeah, now I get it. But it was just a little quick for me in that moment when he comes back to life, when everybody is feeding off each other, that he's like, oh, we did it.
But that's in the last episode. That's not in this one.
Oh, it is? Okay. Well, either way, in that moment, it felt quick.
The end of this one is he gets shot in the head by Mildred. Mildred is taken away. They shoot Bev in the back after she opens the doors to get their 5 minutes, and then they escape. So he doesn't actually wake up because when Bev says open the door, he's like struggling to say something, and it seems like he's telling them to not do it.
Right. Yeah.
But I think what you're referring to is really in the last episode. Okay. Well, when I think so, it's a good segue.
Yeah, we can get into it.
Yeah, the last, and I literally at the end of episode 6, I said to myself, the last episode has to be named Revelation. And then I looked and I was like, yes, it is. Because at the end of all the things, I was very happy that I was right. Because it's like, yes. So we get into the everything is revealed, the finale of everything, the last book of the Bible. So obviously the last part of the episode, we're trying to tie up loose ends. Literally so my theory into how they could beat the beings, the reborn quote unquote people, would be a recall to when the cats were washed up on the shore and they said put them all in a pile and burn them. And so I was like, oh, they just put them all, try to like shoot them and get their 5 minutes, put them in a pile and like burn them. But then throughout the episode, we see that the burning is, actually Bev's idea, which was pretty genius. And now she's like quoting her Bible verse that says, you know, the faithful will come out of the fire. So now let's just burn everything down. But the people who are supposed to survive it, the ones who are most faithful, will come out, and we can just live our, you know, Puritan dreams and lives, which was not the case, because everyone burned everything down, and now they have to just face, they don't have anywhere to hide, and they'll have to face the sunlight. But yeah, just going in with the priest, we find out in this episode as well. Of course, we feel that there's something happening with Mildred and the Monsignor, but now we find out that Sarah is actually his daughter. You know, Mildred didn't want to ruin her family's life and ruin Monsignor's life, so she just kept everything secret. And what another foreshadowing moment that I thought was brilliant was when Sarah was talking to her mom, when Mildred was trying to first coming to and getting her mind back. And so Sarah would ask her questions. And when she asked who my father is, there was a hesitancy in Mildred. She gave that answer. And I was like, the writing and the acting is so fantastic. This is so great. All these callbacks and everything connecting together. And I also feel like in a lot of horror movies in general, you don't get this attention to detail that makes it work. And I feel like for me, what made this work is just the attention to detail. Like there is no stone left unturned as far as things, and whatever is your thoughts about how things ended, or, you know, if the kids made it or whatever, that can be your own interpretation of it. But at the end of the day, like the story that they wanted to tell, they made sure all the loose ends were tied up very well. I thought on that.
Yeah. I think that a couple things that really stood out to me are that the only people that survived were the young people who can take what they learned and experienced and decide what they want to do with it. Kind of, you know, this idea that like nothing lasts forever and things are passed down from people to people. And again, nothing is good or bad. It's about the experiences that you bring to it. So like, you know, the fate of the future of belief and is on the people that are younger than us. I thought that Bev, I think a lot, to me, this also says that like religion can be ruined by the one bag egg in the community. Like literally Bev brought the whole community down and killed the entire community because of her own self-righteousness, and because she just, you know, again, her ability to pull random quotes from the Bible passages also was her undoing, because like that's all like because of that. I thought that Howard scene where she wouldn't let Howie into the rec center,
Oh my God,
like,
that like destroyed me.
I also think that we'll get more into this, but another foreshadowing was Erin talking about how her mom used to clip the wings of the bird she bought, and so like that's what she did to the angel demon, the vampire. Also, just the idea that like, you know, on the DL, like all of these people are trapped in this island, like vampire eating each other, zombie eating each other, whatever you want to categorize it as an analogy to like spreading, like religion can spread beautifully or religion can spread like a virus. And like just like that idea of like you trying to keep it contained was just like really, really, I mean, worked really well. And then and then the one stone that was kind of not unturned was like we never actually see the demon die, even though we see all the what's it called, the ashes come down, so we assume that. But I think part of that also is like the ambiguity in that is like yeah, it was stopped here, but like this doesn't stop here. Like maybe the supernatural element of this, but like this is going to happen in millions of other towns, not because there's a demon there, but because like there's Bev there. But there's also people like a Riley, or like, and I'm going to leave this to Jamie because I know that she'd love this, like Riley's parents, Ed and Annie. Like there are people on the other side of that, like the moment where she steps out of the house to protect them. I know Jamie loved that.
Oh man, I love that confrontation between Riley's mom and Bev, and just
Ooh,
calling out Bev for her bullshit and saying, like, you hate that God loves you and Riley equally. Like, who is Bev to decide, like, what role does Bev have in like knowing who God loves more or less? Like that, and like that, the idea that, like, what is actually more closely, within the Bible is like God loves everyone, right? Like that's what the message is. But
yeah,
Bev's like twisted perception is that, like, no, like I'm closer to God because like I do things this way, and like that makes me better. And Bev and Riley's mom basically saying like no, and like you're, and then the fact that she makes the comment earlier about like, what do we need the knives for, and then sacrifices herself, I think is also really, really incredible. But also, like, about the 5 minutes again, and like gives a few more moments to allow folks to escape. And also, I think it says something that like she doesn't actually let Bev kill her. She's like doing it on her own terms. But then
absolutely.
later when she comes back and finds her husband ET,
Yes.
um
Oh, yes.
the again, like there's that sentiment of like, her reflecting like, oh my God, like I know I'm so hungry, but like I see all these people. Is that like what we're about to be? Is that what this is? And he's like, no, like I've seen them doing that, but like you just have to resist it. Like you don't have to be like them. And like that too was just like so incredible. It's like they have this like deep hunger within them, but like you don't have to succumb to that. Like you can
Exactly.
choose to rise above it. And like that was so powerful. And then obviously like them singing at the end was beautiful, and again like reinforcing that they still have their faith, they still have their belief despite all of this that's happening, that like the
Yes.
faith is still there. And
Yes.
so again, it's like faith can still be something that's beautiful, and I think this was a beautiful scene. And then you also have the sheriff and his son reconciling.
Yeah.
And well, before we even get to that, there's like all of these efforts of the two armies that we were talking about earlier colliding. And basically, as Bev has destroyed every building on the island, with the exception of the church and the community rec center, the opposing group of Aarons has destroyed all of the boats, because even though they don't have the ability to leave yet, the plan is for them to leave the next evening, so that they can continue to, spread the gospel, aka eat more people.
Right.
So they destroy the boats. Then Sarah goes to burn down the church, and the Monsignor like sees it happening, and in that moment is like, because he is rejecting everything that's now happening, which again, I'm going to come back to this because I don't have a problem with him now being good, but I have a problem with like the quick turnaround. Is he agrees with Sarah and is like, yes, let's burn it down. And then, gets shot. And like, oh my God, I was honestly like crying. Like I was like sobbing watching this. I was a mess. That was so upsetting. And I was just so upset between Sarah dying and that poor guy being rejected from the rec center. And then the sheriff and Aaron, attempting to burn down the rec center. They both get stopped. They're both mortally wounded. And then the sheriff's son finally lights fire to the rec center. So now every building has officially been destroyed, and there is no hope. There's no hope for anyone, with the exception of the young people.
Right.
That's where they left off. But I think going back to that piece around like the island, it's like it took me like a day or two later to reflect, and I was like, Brian, they were never going to make it off this island, because I think that's like where you start, right? Like it all comes full
Mhm.
circle, because you have Riley, who attempted to leave the island and then ended up in this horrible tragedy and then ends up back on the island. You have
Yeah.
Erin, who runs away when she's a kid, who ends up experiencing a life of trauma and then ends up back on the island. They both end up dying. all of the adults die. There's no hope for anybody. But I think it's like, again, something about this island where like they can never leave because they have to stay together. But like they all end up together dead, unfortunately. But like they still kind of remain that community. It's just like, it's really sad because I was like, oh, I was like really hoping that they would escape, but like they were never going to escape. There was no way that was ever going to happen because like they were never going to be able to leave the island. They already had their chance and it didn't work. And so like like that's like it makes me sad.
And the fact that regardless of how they died, all those people in that community knew that they were going to die on that island, whether it was from old, like they set their roots there. So even though the death happened a little bit early and not how they might have expected it to,
that was how they were going to go.
Death at the island, that is what was going to happen regardless. That was in the cards for them regardless. And I do want to point out in that transitional period that one of the lines with the turning point of the Monsignor that was great is when Bev was rejecting everyone. And then he just yells like, everybody just come into the church, like all have to be welcome or this isn't God's house, you know? So like this, everybody has to be welcome, but this isn't.
Does he have the line where it's like, I don't remember it exactly, but it was really beautiful where he was like, I think maybe this is the scene where he yells at Bev where it's like, it's never about us. It's always about God. And like, is this the scene you're talking about? Yeah. That was so beautiful. That what I really liked about the Monsignor character is through it all, it was never about him ever. And even in the darkest of moments when he's yelling at Riley or whatever, like it is never, ever, ever, ever about him.
Except
the
whole fucking thing. And that is what gets me pissed. And again, I loved this whole series. I'm so into it and I will highly recommend it. However, like an episode, he's preaching about God's army. He's talking about like essentially he has like fully convinced himself of this idea, but then realizes at the end that like, no, he just did it all for Mildred. And I'm just like, wait, what? And I do love how she's like, no, I lived my life. You lived your life. Like his selfish belief was that he would have a second chance with Mildred. And that is why he was like, I realize that I can live again and like do it all over and like be eternal. And I want my people, in quotes. I want to bring this back to my island and save them as well, quotes. But really it was about saving Mildred and getting to have a second chance with her. And I love how she was like, what?
I was saying that's why the shit didn't work. Because it wasn't for God. It
wasn't for God. Yeah. And that, like, I think it was like that moment of like that self-reflection for him and why he was like so horrified by everything because like, but I was still annoyed because it was just, I mean, I guess that's the point, but I was like, oh, like you're so selfish. You're so selfish and it's infuriating, but like, he really is no different from Bev. He just presented it in like a much more like in a way that is more digestible for us because like you see him making sense of all of it and justifying all of his actions in the same way as Bev, but like obviously she's like outwardly evil and terrible and he's seemingly doing it for good, but the reality is he's doing it all for selfish reasons and it's I am angry.
Do you think that reveal or him saying that undercut a lot of what this show was trying to do, or do you think that fed into the thematic elements of it?
I think it feeds into it because it's still about the meaning that you make. Like that's still so much of it, and I think I think that he deluded himself to believe this meaning that he made that he was trying to save his town. But I think I think once he realized, and part of me wonders if it was both him getting shot and the angel taking Mildred, like that happened all at once. And I think that was the moment where he was like, oh, well, I never intended for Mildred to get hurt. I never, like, the fact that she's shooting me makes me realize like maybe there's something wrong here. But like I don't fully understand, like the God's Army thing does not fully make sense to me because it didn't seem so extremist. Like I feel like just before that, like, and I don't know if that's him again just diluting himself and it's like slowly getting to that point naturally, but I just didn't get this, or maybe it's like Bev adding fuel to the fire,
yeah,
and like her just like because she's so extreme that's like kind of reinforcing this sense that like, oh, we have to spread this gospel, we have to share this knowledge. But then at that point too, it's not about the island, like it's not about his people, it's something different. So it's like, are you just like believing your own lies to justify it to yourself because that's the meaning that you're trying to take away from this? Like you don't want to feel guilty for killing Joe. You don't want to feel guilty for, you know, now Riley is a part of this. You don't want to feel guilty for like you've gotten the whole town involved in this. You don't want to feel guilty for encouraging the town to poison themselves. Like all of these things that you're saying and trying to justify so that you avoid feeling guilt. But the thing, and this is like not him, but the part that really also upset me in my like mid sob was when the other altar boy, I was like, what is it called? Youth person. When the other altar boy reflects to the handyman and is like, I think I killed my mom. And then the handyman's like, yeah, I think I did a bunch of like not good things. And it's like, oh, they're feeling guilt. Like before no one was feeling guilt because Bev was, you know, justifying it, but like now they're feeling guilt. And so like everything that he was saying, everything that the Monsignor was saying was bullshit anyway, because like, no, there's still the guilt there. Once you stop, you know, lying to yourself, like there is the guilt. And I think that guilt, I can't remember if we talked about this in like a previous episode, but like how guilt is a thing that like enables us to create change and strive towards something better, where like shame is something that I don't think serves us as much, but like guilt I think has more of a purpose and can serve us into like towards like being good people. And so like denying that guilt I think is like scary for a lot of these situations that they're talking about in this, because like are like they're trying to justify that they're doing good things, but like they're really not. They're like cherry picking verses from the Bible to justify bad things that they're doing. And so like I think finally when they're feeling that guilt and that remorse for their actions, like that is them kind of coming back to like, you know, the original faith and like purpose of all of this, not the stuff that like Bev was spewing. But yeah, anyway, I just like went on a crazy rant.
No, but that's all great things. Like, I mean, I was just going to say really quickly, because that's what makes the AA meeting when Monsignor was saying, stop bullshitting me, because he's not saying that to Riley. He's actually really saying that to himself, because he is bullshitting himself to believe that what he is doing is okay. And that's also an example when, even with the Joe situation, he didn't want to do it. He was resisting it the whole time. So he was having like reservations about like, I don't want to be killing this, but now that it's already happened and now that we're here, let me just pile on some miracles and just help other people to kind of undercut the fact that I just did this, that I didn't really want to do, but was tempted to do because of whatever hunger that was inside of him. And so he's literally just like he's bullshitting himself into thinking that everything is okay, which I think in talking through that makes the whole through line more clearer to me. Because like you said, Jamie, like the turnaround was a little quick for him, but even just in you saying that, I was like, okay, well now there's other key points that make it make sense to me.
Oh, and the fear, we didn't even talk about like the fear conversation, because like at the end Bev clearly dies in fear. She's trying not to, like, when the sun comes
Oh,
up
we
and
didn't talk
everyone
about that at all.
dies.
Yeah.
But like Bev is clearly trying to like dig a hole to prevent herself from also immolating, and is like definitely fearful of death. And now I'm forgetting like the
So
conversation about fear
so
that he was talking
the
about earlier.
the priest talks a lot about fear and how fear is a natural response, and like you feed off of that, like the idea that, you know, when Jesus was unveiled during the on the resurrection on Easter, like people were afraid. When Moses saw the burning bush, that started with fear. And so he talks about all of that, and fear is a lot in here. But one of the most and that fear, that pulse that they can feel, they can hear, is kind of what they feed on. And he talks a little bit about that, and there's more intricacies to that as well. But when Riley is sitting in the boat with Aaron, the first thing she says to him is like, I'm not afraid, I'm not fearful of you, there's no fear here, I will help you, whatever it takes, I will do it for you. And like that was just like her showing that level of comfort, that no fear, and which is totally genuine. One allowed him to like keep going, but also completely contradict exactly what Pruitt said to him, which I think like justified his decision more, and obviously thematically was really important and pretty astute.
Yeah, and then you have the fear of people who didn't want to take the rat poison as opposed to other
Yeah,
people.
totally.
Like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm here for it. I have the faith enough to say, you know, I'll let this happen to me because I know that I would be better on the other side. But there were still people who were like, no, this is not for me. And then there's also a theme of, you know, God being a fearful being, and so following him out of fear as opposed to real devotion. And so there's some, you know, aspects of
Sure.
that. Like maybe some people are just like, people don't want to speak up against Bev because, you know, whatever reason, but they're also afraid of what she's going to say or what she's going to do or whatever, you know, because you know she's out here killing dogs and all these things with rat poison. So
Mm.
they're just, you know, the fear aspect of religion. And I loved um the idea that they call this an angel, but how he's presented, you know, some people in the congregation did see him as an angel, but some were fearful of him. And then the references in the Bible of every time a human saw an angel, they were fearful of that
Yeah,
being.
yeah.
So I thought that was really cool because when you speak of angels, you know, that's not the image that you see is in
No,
this
right.
show. But in the Bible, it does say, you know, whatever, if it's literal or not, that it's, you know, everyone was fearful of these beings. So what does that mean? What do they look like if people are fearful of them? So I thought this was a great representation of those verses. Yeah. Any last thoughts on this? We spoke a lot about.
I want to hear more from you about how you. I mean, I loved it. I think it's one of my favorite things ever. I mean, like, what a. Oh, we didn't even talk about like when she's about to die, Aaron, and then she's put back on the couch and actually speaks about what she now believes death is, and that
Mm.
like God is death is, you know, you give your energy back into the universe, and like God is all the pebbles on the sand, and God is in all of that. And I just thought that was so, to me, that's what made this even more personal, because that was Mike Flanagan stating his opinion with his wife actually saying those words. And I think that was really beautiful. And I think that again, that's just one opinion. That it's not, that's, he never presents anything as the answer. He presents that as that person's opinion. We just, but also him as the filmmaker puts it front and center, because that is how, obviously, how he feels as well. But you know, if he wanted that to be the only answer, he wouldn't have had the beautiful scene where Riley's parents start to sing the hymn as they know they're going to die. Like they're, you know, they're all on the spectrum of different things. But I want to ask you, as somebody who is, how did this make you feel, as somebody who grew up in this environment, still practices, like still has these attachments, and like I feel like nostalgia tied in with belief, tied in with faith.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your experience, like emotionally going through this.
Yeah, and I'll be really quick about it because that is a very long conversation because I definitely felt all of the emotions, especially the nostalgia, because I am not Catholic, but I went to a Catholic private school, kindergarten through 8th grade, but I've been in the Christian church setting my whole life. And so watching something like this in the back of my mind, you think, oh, this is another like stab at Christianity. Like I know what this is going to be because, there are definitely all of these factors with people that are like Bev, that are extremists, that I have, like I said, I grew up with, and I know people who are like this and who would just, walk the ends of the earth for something that is so nuanced. But because people want a definitive answer, they will follow whatever will give them that definitive answer. So in watching this, to see it all unfold in a way that, like I stated before, my friend was like, it's not telling you specifically which way to go. It helped me just to see what is the bigger picture of what he's trying to say. And so for me, this whole theme this whole show, the main theme for me was reconciliation, which is like I said, one of the sacraments in Catholicism. And basically it's just how to be at peace again is what reconciliation is. So everyone in this show is trying to find their peace again, trying to find their purpose again in whatever extreme coping mechanisms or ways that they do that. It's whatever their individual choice was. But I just love that at the end of it, it was like, whatever is true to you is the truth for you. It's not necessarily like this is bad and this is good. Like we talk about, there's like gray areas all around. Obviously there are definite things that people did wrong for killing people. And that's not, and that also was a thing to me that I was like, why is nobody bringing up those verses of like, that's one of the 10 commandments, like thou shalt not kill. Nobody is talking about that. We're just servicing these verses, like Jamie said, for other purposes. But again, that's all of that I was experiencing is nothing new. But what I took away from it was the general theme of it. And I appreciated that he was not stomping on any particular religion. It was mostly just about how are we as individuals, as a community, as a family, trying to be at peace again with all of this guilt, with all of this fear, with all of the things that we've experienced in this life. And so that was the more relatable thing. And then just the added like hymns and stuff, that was the nostalgia, was like the added icing on the cake for me. So yeah.
Sure.
It's great.
Cool. Should we do Rotten Tomatoes?
It's the Rotten Tomatoes game.
100%.
120,000%.
I'm gonna say 100%. This is incredible.
I'm gonna say 98. I'm
So
sure
it's a
there's
90,
like one grumpy person.
It's a 92%.
Oh,
Bust. Oh,
so 2 grumpy people.
Yeah, and the critics' consensus is an ambitious mediation. Oh, excuse me, no, that's not what it says. An ambitious meditation on grief and faith that is as gorgeous as it is unsettling. Midnight Mass's slow boil is a triumph of terror that will leave viewers shaking and thinking long after the credits roll.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking more than I'm shaking.
Well, definitely thinking. It's just so cool that Flanagan used religion as a vessel for all of these themes.
Mhm.
That it's not, like we said, it's not really about like the religion itself. It's about so much more. But we're just choosing religion as a vessel to tell these stories. And it's beautiful, beautiful to watch as someone who has experienced Catholicism and as someone who is a Christian, like having all these themes intertwined with life. It's just nice to have this kind of perspective. Also, I wrote in one of my notes, like Jesus and horror, like this is my bag. This is what I need.
Let's do the 4 S's.
Skull, scare, shakes, and suggestions. The Talking Horrors 4S's.
So we have skulls, scares, shakes, and suggestions. Jamie, let's start with you for skulls.
I'm gonna give this like a 9, I think. Yeah, like it's just very thoughtful and intentional, um and like the visuals I think are a really good representation of like reality. I think it's demonstrating things like very effectively. I love it.
Ditto,
Nikisha?
Jamie, with the 9. Yes, 9s for me.
I'm gonna go 10. Like this is just like, this is the type of breakdown that I want, and I just think that they totally did it. Scares, Jamie.
I think I'm gonna give it a 4, because it wasn't very scary. I think the only time I jumped was when Brian screamed when the creature was in the window, and Brian scared the crap out of me, and then I yelled at him. um but I think there's it's definitely can be like a slow burn. There's a lot of just tension building. So while you might not get the jump scares, there's still that underlying like what's going to happen, like where are they going with this, like what do they know, what don't they know yet. So not like overly spooky. So I think a 4.
Sure. Nikisha?
I am going to give it an 8, and not because it was jump scary, but just because the religious extremist aspect was just very unsettling. Maybe that's more in the shakes department, but I'm still going to stick with my answer with an 8.
You stick with your answer.
Stick with the
I'm gonna go 6.5. Definitely jump scares, especially in the first couple of episodes. And then just like a lot of the ambiance, like really, like I was definitely biting my nails and clenching most of the time.
Oh yeah, that score is phenomenal. Also, I just want to say them ending with not even singing the fucking last note of that choir song. I just clapped at the end. This is so great. Fantastic.
Shakes.
I'm gonna give this a 7. I've really been thinking about it like all weekend since we've been watching it. We'll randomly think about it again and like reflect on something new. But like it's really, yeah, I just like keep thinking about it and keep reflecting on its impact in my life and like thinking about religion, and yeah, I can't stop.
All right, Nikisha.
I am going to say a 9 only because I just finished it today, a couple of hours before this. So it's still just heavy on my mind. I've texted like 10 people to tell them to watch it. Actually, even I watched like the first 4 episodes Friday, and then I couldn't get to it again until like today. But even in those 4 episodes, I was like telling my friend, who shout out to Terrence, who listens to our podcast every Thursday as part of his morning routine now. I was like, you have to watch this so that you can watch the episode, listen to the episode when it comes out. But I was texting everybody about this. It's fantastic. 9.
This is a 10 for me. No other commentary needed.
Yes.
Cool. So suggestions.
So I'm gonna suggest, I mean, everyone should see all of Mike Flanagan's things. But I have a suggestion for an interesting TV show called Evil, which is it's kind of a little bit goofy, but I did binge watch the first season of it. Because it's about this like psychologist who teams up with somebody, this show.
I haven't. Yes, I've been meaning to watch it because people have suggested it to me. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I haven't watched it. Yes.
Yes. So it's a psychologist who teams up with this person who works for the Catholic Church, and basically they are in each episode trying to determine if someone who is like, responsible for doing something quote evil, whether that person is possessed or if the evilness like lies within them as a person. And so like trying to figure out like, is it normal people evil, or is it like supernatural evil? And it's pretty interesting. Apparently season 2 is back and it's supposed to be really good, so I'll probably keep watching it. But yeah, in terms of like another Catholic Church representation, another area where there's like some supernatural, but also some like mental health, which is really interesting. So yeah, another therapist recommended it to me. So check it out.
Nice.
Nikisha?
I honestly, I'm so bad at these, and I did not think about a suggestion. But in our conversations, I'm gonna go with Doubt because of the religious commentary of it all, but also like you have to make the decision on your own about what it actually happens at the end of the movie. No spoilers in that, but just it's a thinker, and it's one of those, you individualized things of where your faith could lie or the gray areas of it all and all that stuff. So I'm going to suggest Meryl Streep, Doubt, Viola Davis, amazing performances all around.
Like Jamie, obviously watch Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor. But I'm going to go with the movie Saint Maud. Which is about this kind of newly religious person who becomes a caretaker for someone who is not religious, and the things that go on there. So I'm going to say Saint Maud as a suggestion.
I still have to watch that. Oh, so many things to do. Okay, that was
cool.
a lot.
Woo! We did it.
But we did it.
The whole
show. We hope that you guys enjoyed this as much as we have obviously enjoyed this show. Suggest it to your friends, and then tell them to listen to this podcast after they watch all of the episodes.
Yay.
You can definitely find us on Instagram and Twitter at Talk Horror Pod. We are back, baby. Season 2 coming out. Episodes.
I thought you said sleezin, and I was like, whoa, that's the opposite of this very religious episode. We're sleezing it up. Season 2, baby.
That's going to be our theme now. Sleezing it up. Season 2.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Season 1, we're trying our best. Season 2 is we're sleezing it up.
Giving you a little va va voom, a little extra bop. So thank you guys so much for listening. And Brian, where can they listen to us?
Sure, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, things like Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us there. 5 stars, please.
And thank you.
Thank ya.
We hope you guys enjoy Midnight Mass. Thank you so much. Any parting words, Jamie? A quote or two? Maybe a Bible verse?
Oh, I mean, if it's a Bible verse, then I am absolutely delegating that to you, ma'am.
I don't even know. All I can think of right now is Jesus wept, because it's the shortest Bible verse, but also we wept through this, basically our empathic selves.
I wept. If anybody ever wants to like hear me sniffle and recover, my 7th voice memo after watching this is, me being sad.
Sad times. We all wept at the hauntingly beautiful Midnight Mass. Thank y'all for listening.
And fuck Bev.
Yes.